In the blistering heat of Al Dhafra Air Base, a brutal hierarchy rules. Fighter pilots strut like gods, openly mocking the bus drivers who fly the heavy C-17 cargo planes. Major Elena Vance takes their insults in stride, even as they joke about her grocery runs. But they don't know that her cargo today isn't supplies. It's the Hammerfall, a classified bunker buster essential for the war effort. When a terrifying storm blinds the fighter jets and forces them to retreat, the mission appears doomed. Now, the invisible pilot they scorned must plunge her massive aircraft into the tempest. While the real warriors watch from safety, Elena is about to show them that noise doesn't lift the payload. Precision does. From wherever you're watching, let us know in the comments. And if this story has earned you respect, click like so others can find it too. The heat at Al Dhafra Air Base was not merely a weather condition. It was an oppressive physical presence that seemed to possess its own gravity, pressing down on the tarmac with a weight that made the very air shimmer and dance in hallucinogenic waves of distortion. It was 120 degrees in the shade, but out here on the flight line, surrounded by millions of square feet of concrete and the radiating warmth of jet engines, it felt closer to the surface of the sun. This was a world of sharp edges and blinding light, a place where the machinery of war was stripped of its political abstraction and reduced to the raw, grinding reality of metal, fuel, and human endurance. The base was a sprawling city of tents, hangars, and bunkers, a temporary empire built on sand, but within its perimeter, a strict and unspoken caste system governed every interaction. At the apex of this hierarchy, strutting like the gods of a modern mythology, were the fighter pilots. They were the knights of the air, the men and women who flew the F-22 Raptors and the F-15 Strike Eagles, machines so advanced, so lethal, and so ruinously expensive that they were treated with more reverence than the people who flew them. These pilots walked with a specific kind of gait, a loose-limbed, rolling swagger that broadcasted their status to anyone within 100 yards. They wore their G-suits like medieval armor and their mirrored sunglasses like crowns. They were the hunters, the killers, the ones who made the newsreels and the recruitment posters. And then, exiled to the far side of the airfield, parked on the cracking concrete of the overflow ramp known affectionately as the Boneyard, were the heavy lifters, the C-17 Globemaster IIIs. To the uninitiated, these aircraft were engineering marvels, bulbous gray whales capable of lifting 60 tons of cargo into the sky and landing on a dirt strip no longer than a supermarket parking lot. But to the fighter jocks, they were simply trash haulers. They were flying warehouses. They were the background noise of the war, necessary but unglamorous like plumbing or garbage collection. And the pilots who flew them were viewed with a mixture of pity and dismissal. They weren't considered warriors. They were considered bus drivers. Major Elena Vance stood in the shadow of her C-17's massive drooping wing, the shade offering only a fractional relief from the relentless sun. She was 42 years old, and every one of those years seemed etched into the corners of her eyes, not from age, but from the kind of bone-deep fatigue that accumulates after 2 decades of hauling heavy metal across hostile time zones. She didn't have the movie star jawline or the perfectly tailored flight suit of the fighter pilots across the way. Her uniform was baggy, practical, stained with a smudge of hydraulic fluid on the left knee and dust on the cuffs. Her hair was pulled back into a severe functional bun that had long ago surrendered any attempt at style in favor of pure utility. She held a clipboard in her gloved hand, her eyes scanning the hydraulic lines of the No. 3 engine strut with a forensic intensity. To Elena, this aircraft wasn't just a machine. It was a living ecosystem of pressures, temperatures, and tolerances, and she knew its pulse better than she knew her own. She was the invisible professional, the person who made the war possible while the others took the credit. She checked the tire pressure on the main landing gear, kicking the massive rubber wheel with the toe of her boot, a ritualistic gesture of connection. As she marked a checkbox on her manifest, the sound of raucous laughter cut through the drone of the ground power units. A group of 4 fighter pilots was walking past on the access road, heading toward their pristine, sun-shaded jets. They were led by Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, call sign Torch, a man whose reputation for aerial skill was matched only by his reputation for suffocating arrogance. He was the golden boy of the wing, a man who had never flown a mission that didn't involve afterburners and air-to-air kills. He slowed as he saw Elena, his squad stopping behind him like a pack of wolves sensing prey. Mitchell took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were cold and amused. He looked up at the C-17, shaking his head as if looking at a relic from a museum, then turned his gaze to Elena. "Afternoon, Vance," he called out, his voice pitched perfectly to carry over the engine noise. "I see you're kicking the tires. Make sure you check the oil, too. Hate for you to break down on the highway and make us late for the real war." The other pilot snickered, a low, cruel sound of shared superiority. It was the standard joke. It was always the standard joke. The implication was clear. What they did was war. What she did was traffic. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't stiffen her spine or show the flash of anger they were hoping for. She had learned long ago that in this world, reaction was interpreted as weakness. If you defended yourself, you lost. If you got angry, you were emotional. The only defense was an impenetrable wall of competence. She slowly lowered the clipboard, meeting Mitchell's gaze with a flat, unreadable expression. "The bird is green, Torch," she said, her voice calm, devoid of any challenge. "Just make sure you clear the airspace. We're carrying a heavy load today, and I don't want to have to file a report because one of your boys got sucked into my wake turbulence." Mitchell laughed, a short barking sound. He stepped closer, invading her personal space just enough to be aggressive without breaking regulation. "Heavy load? What is it this time? Toilet paper? MREs? Maybe some new PlayStations for the fob?" He turned to his men. "You hear that, boys? The major here is bringing the essentials. We better keep the sky safe so she can drive her bus in peace." He turned back to her, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Just stay out of the way, Vance. We've got a high-value target package today, real work. Don't clog up the frequency with logistics chatter." They walked away, high-fiving and adjusting their gear, leaving Elena standing alone in the heat. The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just the words. It was the complete erasure of her existence as a soldier. They didn't know, and they didn't care to know, that the toilet paper she was hauling was actually the Mk-88 Hammerfall, a prototype classified bunker buster system that was the only weapon in the theater capable of destroying the target they were assigned to hit. They didn't know that the bombers were grounded due to a maintenance stand-down and that command had improvised, strapping a weapon meant for a B-2 Spirit onto a cargo pallet in the back of her C-17. They saw a bus driver. They didn't see the person carrying the sledgehammer. Elena watched them go, her jaw tightening just once, a small ripple of tension in her masseter muscle, before she turned back to the landing gear. "Let them talk," she whispered to herself. "Noise doesn't lift the payload." She climbed the crew ladder, the metal railing burning her hand through the glove, and stepped into the cool, dark cavern of the cargo hold. The interior of the C-17 was a cathedral of utilitarian metal, a vast tunnel filled with rollers, chains, and the smell of ozone and hydraulic fluid. In the center of the bay, strapped down with triple reinforced chains on a specialized extraction pallet, sat the Hammerfall. It was a massive, ominous cylinder of olive drab steel, silent and deadly, waiting to be unleashed. The loadmaster, Sergeant Gonzalez, was checking the tension on the chains. He looked up as Elena walked past, his face grim. He had heard the pilots outside. "They don't know, do they, Major?" Gonzalez asked quietly. Elena paused, her hand resting on the cold steel of the bomb. "No, Sergeant. They don't. Maybe we should tell them," Gonzalez muttered, tightening a ratchet strap with a violent jerk. "Maybe we should let them know who's actually bringing the rain today." Elena shook her head. "We don't do this for them, Gonzalez. We do it for the mission. Get this load secure. We launch in 40. She made her way up to the flight deck, the sanctuary of the cockpit. Her co-pilot, First Lieutenant David Keyes Miller, was already strapped into the right seat. He was young, talented, and fiercely loyal, but he lacked Elena's seasoned callousness. His face was flushed, his hands gripping the armrests too tightly. "I hate them," Keyes said, not looking up from the flight management computer. "I genuinely hate them. Bus driver. Grocery run. Who do they think keeps their jets fueled? Who brings their ammo? Who flies them home when they eject?" Elena settled into the left seat, the commander's seat, and began the familiar soothing ritual of the pre-flight flow. Switches clicked, Screens flickered to life. The aircraft began to wake up around her, a beast stirring from slumber. "Hate is heavy, Keyes," she said softly, adjusting her headset. "And we're already flying close to max gross weight. Let it go." "How do you do that?" Keyes looked at her, exasperated. "How do you let them treat you like a civilian?" "Because I know something they don't," Elena said, her eyes scanning the engine instruments as the APU spooled up. "I know that when the weather turns and the fancy avionics fail and the runway is gone, they call us. Physics doesn't care about their ego. Physics respects only one thing: precision. Now, give me the readback on the departure clearance." The mission, Operation Obsidian, was critical. Intelligence had located a high-level meeting of insurgent commanders in a fortified bunker complex deep within the Panjshir Valley. The complex was protected by a network of caves and a reinforced concrete bridge that served as the only supply line. The plan was for the fighters to sweep the skies of enemy air threats, then for the C-17 to drop the hammerfall on the bridge, sealing the commanders inside for Special Forces teams to capture. It was a hammer and anvil strike, but the timeline was tight. The target window was less than 20 minutes. The takeoff was heavy and sluggish. The C-17 groaned as it lifted off the runway, the 4 Pratt & Whitney engines screaming at full thrust to push nearly 600,000 pounds of metal and fuel into the sky. They climbed slowly, laboriously, watching the F-22's rocket past them in vertical climbs, showing off their power. "Mu-01 departure," the controller chirped. "Turn heading 090. Climb and maintain flight level 240. "Copy departure," Elena replied. "Mu-01 passing 3,000 for 240. The cruise portion of the flight was a study in contrast. On the radio, the fighter frequency was a constant stream of chatter, banter, tactical callouts, and the casual arrogance of men who felt invincible. "Viper 1, fencing in," Mitchell broadcasted. "Music on, radar clean. Looks like a milk run, boys. Let's keep the skies clear for the garbage truck behind us." Elena sat in silence, monitoring the fuel flow, the oil pressure, the wind vectors. She was flying the plane with her fingertips, making micro-adjustments to the trim to save every ounce of fuel. A cargo pilot doesn't fly with aggression. She flies with efficiency. Every pound of fuel saved was a minute of loiter time over the target. Hours passed. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the moonless night swallowed the desert. As they approached the Hindu Kush mountain range, the atmosphere inside the cockpit shifted. The smooth air of the cruise gave way to the jagged, unpredictable turbulence of the mountains. And then, the radar painted the nightmare. A massive, unpredicted storm cell was developing directly over the target area. It wasn't just rain. It was a swirling vortex of wind shear, hail, and impenetrable cloud cover that extended from the ground up to 30,000 feet. It was a solid wall of violence. "Viper leader to AWACS," Mitchell's voice came over the radio, the confident drawl replaced by a tight-clipped tone. "We are painting severe weather over the target. Visibility is 0. Repeat, 0. "Copy, Viper," the AWACS controller replied, his voice tense. "Target is time-sensitive. Ground teams report the enemy convoy is preparing to cross the bridge. If they cross, we lose them. You need to strike that bridge now." "I can't see the bridge," Mitchell snapped, frustration bleeding into his voice. "My radar is cluttered with precipitation. I can't get a lock, and I can't dive a Raptor into a box canyon in a blind storm. The terrain masking is too tight. If I go below the hard deck, I'll slam into a mountain." "Viper, advise intentions," AWACS queried. There was a long pause, a pause that signaled defeat. The Knights of the Air were checkmated. Their speed was useless, their stealth was irrelevant. Their missiles couldn't see through the rock and rain. "AWACS, Viper 1 is scrubbing the run," Mitchell said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "We are orbiting high. We can't get down there. It's suicide." The mission was dead. The enemy was going to escape because the real warriors couldn't operate in the mud. In the cockpit of the C-17, Keyes looked at Elena. "They're aborting," he whispered. "After all that talk, they're quitting." Elena didn't look at him. She was looking at the topographic map on her display, overlaying it with the weather radar. She was doing math in her head, sync rates, turn radiuses, airspeed limitations. She knew this valley. She had flown rice and blankets into this valley 5 years ago, in a battered C-130 with no autopilot, weaving through the passes to drop supplies to refugees. She knew that the third turn looked like a dead end but opened up if you hugged the left wall. She knew the wind usually drafted up the northern face. She knew the bus driver route. "We're not aborting," Elena said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the cockpit. "Loadmaster, prepare the package for manual extraction, combat offload procedures. We are going in." Keyes' eyes went wide. "Major?" "You heard him. It's zero viz. That's a box canyon. We're a heavy. We can't turn in there." "We don't need to turn," Elena said, disengaging the autopilot. "We need to slide." She keyed the radio. "Viper leader, this is Moose 01. We have the package. We are commencing our run." The radio went silent. Stunned silence. Then Mitchell's voice, incredulous and bordering on angry. "Moose? Did you hear me? I said it's zero visibility. You're in a flying apartment building. You can't maneuver in that soup. You'll kill your crew. Abort and return to base." Elena's hand tightened on the yoke. This was the moment. The intersection of every insult, every dismissal, every bus driver joke. She could turn back. She could accept her place in the hierarchy, or she could do her job. "I'm not asking for permission, Viper," Elena said, her voice dropping into the icy, terrifying calm of absolute command. "I'm informing you of my vector. Stay high and keep the MiGs off my back. I'll handle the mud." Before Mitchell could respond, she pushed the yoke forward. The nose of the C-17 dropped, and the massive aircraft fell out of the sky, plunging into the swirling darkness of the storm. The transition was violent. 1 second they were in the smooth night air. The next they were inside a washing machine. The wind slammed into the fuselage with the force of a train wreck. Rain hammered the windshield so hard it sounded like gravel. The cockpit shook, the instrument panels vibrating so violently the numbers blurred. Sync rate, the ground proximity warning system screamed, its artificial voice cutting through the roar. Terrain, pull up. Ignore it, Elena ordered, her eyes locked on the radar altimeter. Keyes, call out the altitude, eyes inside. Do not look out the window. Passing angels 5, 4, 3. Keyes' voice was trembling, pitch high with terror. Major, the walls. The radar shows walls on both sides. We're in the chute. I know, Elena whispered. She wasn't fighting the plane. She was dancing with it. A C-17 is a heavy, sluggish beast if you try to force it. But if you anticipate the weight, if you let the momentum carry you, it can move with surprising grace. She felt the drift of the tail, the side slip of the wind. She was flying a 200-ton aircraft through a winding canyon in pitch blackness, relying on a mental map and the feel of the hydraulics in her hands. Above them, the fighter pilots were watching their tactical displays in horror. They saw the transponder of the C-17 weaving through the labyrinth of the canyon, making turns that shouldn't be physically possible. She's insane, one of the wingmen muttered on the radio. She's going to splatter on the rocks. Shut up, Mitchell snapped. He was staring at his screen, mesmerized. He was watching a bus driver do something he wouldn't dare attempt in a jet with 10 times the thrust-to-weight ratio. Inside the C-17, the tension was physical. 2 minutes to drop, Gonzalez yelled from the back. Ramp opening. The rear of the aircraft opened to the night, and the howl of the storm intensified, filling the cargo bay with freezing wind and rain. The noise was deafening. Speed is too high, Keyes shouted. We need 140 knots for the drop. We're at 200. I can't slow down yet or we'll stall in the turn, Elena gritted out. Deploying speed brakes. Now. She slammed the speed brake lever back. The aircraft shuddered violently as the panels on the wings extended, acting like air anchors. The deceleration threw them forward against their harnesses. The stall warning stick shaker began to rattle. The plane was on the verge of falling out of the sky. Elena feathered the throttles, balancing on the razor's edge between stalling and crashing into the canyon walls. They were so low now that the enemy on the ground could hear them. Muzzle flashes erupted from the darkness below, anti-aircraft guns waking up to the sound of the screaming engines. Taking fire! Gonzalez screamed. Left side! They're bracketing us! Tracers zipped past the cockpit window, angry streaks of red light in the gray fog. Bullets impacted the fuselage, a terrifying thwack, thwack, thwack that sounded like hail on a tin roof. Hold steady, Elena commanded, her voice steel. She didn't jink. She didn't weave. Evasive maneuvers were for fighters. A cargo drop required a steady platform. If she banked now, the pallet would jam in the rails and they would be flying a bomb around until they ran out of fuel. She had to fly straight and level into the teeth of the guns. 1 minute, 30 seconds. Keyes counted down, his voice shaking but clear. Target is dead ahead. Bridge complex. 3, 2, 1. Drop. Elena hit the green light. In the back, the extraction chute caught the slipstream, inflating with a concussive boom. It dragged the massive Hammerfall pallet out of the aircraft. The C-17 lurched upward, suddenly 30,000 pounds lighter. Load away! Load clear! Elena slammed the throttles to the stops. Power! Flaps up. She pulled the yoke back, banking the aircraft hard, too hard, dangerously hard to the right, scraping the belly of the plane over the ridgeline as they climbed. Behind them, in the darkness of the valley, the Hammerfall struck. It wasn't a Hollywood explosion, it was a geological event. The bunker buster punched through the concrete of the bridge and detonated deep within the structure. The shockwave vaporized the bridge, collapsing the tunnel entrance and sealing the enemy commanders inside. A massive fireball rose through the clouds, illuminating the C-17 from below in a ghostly orange light. Target destroyed! Keyes screamed, pumping his fist. Direct hit! The bridge is gone! But the celebration was cut short. Launch! Launch! Sam at 6 o'clock! The threat warning system wailed. A heat-seeking missile had locked onto their exhaust plumes. Flares! Elena shouted. She hit the dispense button and the night sky behind them filled with magnesium decoys. But a cargo plane is a big target. The missile was confused by the flares, but not enough. It detonated 10 meters off the tail, the shrapnel shredding the rudder and severing a hydraulic line. The aircraft kicked sideways violently. We're hit! Losing hydraulic system too! Keyes yelled, his hands flying over the emergency panel. Rudder authority is sluggish. I have control, Elena said, wrestling the yoke. She used differential thrust, throttling up the left engines and idling the right, to force the nose back to center. It was brute force flying, a wrestling match with a wounded Leviathan. They clawed their way out of the valley, engine temperatures redlining, the airframe groaning under the stress. Slowly, agonizingly, they punched through the cloud tops and emerged back into the clear, star-lit sky. The storm raged below them, a conquered monster. The radio was silent. The fighter pilots, circling safely at 20,000 feet, had seen the explosion. They had seen the data link confirm the target's destruction. They had seen the garbage truck fly into hell, deliver the knockout blow and fly back out. Moose 01. Mitchell's voice broke the silence. It was unrecognizable. The sneer was gone. The confidence was shaken. It was the voice of a man who had just seen a ghost. Moose. Confirm target status? Target is neutralized, Viper, Elena said. Her voice was tired, flat. She didn't gloat. She didn't seek validation. She just reported the facts. We are RTB with minor damage. You boys can head home. We cleared the road for you. The flight back to Al Dhafra was a blur of exhaustion. Elena's arms burned. Her shirt was soaked through with sweat. When the runway lights of the base appeared in the distance, they looked like the most beautiful things she had ever seen. She landed the wounded bird gently, a grease job landing despite the damage, preserving the airframe. She taxied to the parking spot, the engines whining down into silence. She sat there for a moment, the checklist in her lap, her hands trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. You did it, Major, Keyes whispered, looking at her with wide, worshipful eyes. You actually did it. We did it, Keyes, she corrected. Let's go home. She unstrapped and climbed down the crew ladder. She expected the ramp to be empty, or perhaps just the maintenance crew cursing the damage. Instead, she stopped halfway down the steps. There was a crowd. The ground crews were there, yes. But standing in front of them, still in their flight gear, were the fighter pilots. Mitchell stood at the front, flanked by his wingmen. They weren't leaning on their cars, they weren't laughing, they weren't holding their helmets with that casual, arrogant dangle. They were standing at attention. Mitchell looked at the C-17. He saw the shrapnel holes in the tail. He saw the oil streaking the fuselage. He saw the scorching on the engine nacelles. Then he looked at Elena. He looked at her messy hair, her baggy suit, the grease on her cheek. And for the first time, he didn't see a bus driver. He saw the person who had gone where he was too afraid to go. He saw the person who had saved the mission. He stepped forward, his face serious, stripped of all its former vanity. He didn't say a word. He didn't offer a half-hearted apology or a joke to lighten the mood. He simply straightened his back, snapped his heels together, and raised his hand in a slow, crisp, unwavering salute. It was the kind of salute you give to a Medal of Honor recipient. One by one, the other fighter pilots followed suit. The knights of the air were saluting the trash hauler. The silence on the tarmac was absolute. It was heavy, but it wasn't the heaviness of oppression anymore. It was the heaviness of respect, the kind of respect that cannot be asked for, only taken by force of will. Elena stood on the ladder, looking down at them. She didn't smile, she didn't cry. She felt a profound sense of calm settle over her. She adjusted her clipboard, straightened her shoulders, and returned the salute. She held it for a beat longer than regulation, her eyes locking with Mitchell's, acknowledging the shift in the universe. Then she dropped her hand, nodded once, and walked down the steps. She walked past the line of pilots, past the stunned ground crew, heading toward the operations building to file her report. She walked with the same gait she always had, steady, efficient, invisible. But as she passed Mitchell, she heard him whisper to his wingman. The words were quiet, carried on the desert wind, but she heard them. "I didn't know," Mitchell whispered. "I didn't know a pilot could do that." Elena didn't stop. She didn't look back. She just kept walking into the sunrise, the invisible professional who had finally been seen, the bus driver who had just taken them all to school,